All right, today we're going to just go ahead and continue on with this series that I've entitled The Final Act, not meaning the final act of this church, but meaning the final act of the greatest show on earth, the series that we started before this. It really has just flowed into this. The first week in this, we started out in Ephesians chapter 5. You don't have to go over there now, but Ephesians 5:2, you know this, begins with these words: walk in love as Christ. And of course it says more, as Christ has loved us. But walk in love as Christ, implying walk in love as Christ walked in love. Walk in love. And I told you that very first week that really that statement is first and foremost about environment more than it is about behavior. It is secondarily about behavior. We have been taught basically in the way it's been presented to us over the years that walking in love has to do with what we do, but really it has to do with where we walk, where we abide, where we dwell. So it has more, first and foremost, it has to do with environment. And we're going to be talking a great deal more about environment as we go forward in this series. But everything I'm doing right now is related to environment. So what we're doing this week and last week is we're kind of walking around on the grounds, if you will. We're just kind of breathing in this purified air of the gospel. And what we're doing is we're surveying, researching a little bit the behaviors that are peculiar to this environment. Now, we have another environment, of course, the environment that most of us, even in our Christian life, have been familiar with. And it's not an environment of love, okay? We say the words, but the environment is what we're really wanting to focus on right now. See, the outside of this environment, where most of us have lived our Christian life, we've heard about these behaviors. We've heard about them from the pulpit. We've heard about them in Daily Vacation Bible School. We've heard about them in Sunday school class. We've heard from the pulpit. We've heard about these behaviors. Love your brother, love your enemies, love your neighbor, so on and so forth, right? But we've heard about these things, and maybe if we've even tried to model these behaviors that we do find within the environment. We've tried to model them, though, from the outside without realizing that it's the environment. It's the environment that actually facilitates the behaviors. And so any behavioral model we try to portray outside the appropriate environment is a failure. It just doesn't work out, all right? Okay? Now, one of the important things we learn about these behaviors within this environment is that these behaviors are a product of our well-being. And as such, they are revealed to us, from the perspective of our wholeness rather than from obedience perspective. See, this is what we've heard. On the outside, we've heard about the obedience of judge not lest you be judged. We've heard, from an obedience perspective, okay? Love your enemies, love your neighbor, so on and so forth. Be merciful. All right, we've heard these things from an obedience perspective, but within this environment, we learned that these behaviors are actually the product of our well-being, and so consequently, they're presented to us as we begin to understand Jesus and, of course, his repetitive apostles, those who are repeating what he said. We begin to listen to them. We realize that what they're really doing is they're speaking to our wholeness, not to our obedience. Does that make sense to you? Okay. So in other words, the benefit to ourselves of participating in these behaviors is a priority revelation. The benefit to ourselves. Now I want you to think about this. We have two extremes. The transition from the self-centeredness of judging according to the appearance of things, of judging according to the flesh, the transition from that place to loving your enemies, all the way at the other end of the spectrum. It's not loving your brother, loving your neighbor, loving your friend, or even your adversary, but it's all the way down on the other end of the spectrum is loving your enemies, right? So the transition, again, so I'm saying this, that what we're seeing in this as we begin to understand the heart of Jesus in these various commandments that we have understood now to be strategies, so that kind of helps us understand a little bit of the heart of Jesus. But we need to realize that what we're understanding is the benefit to ourselves of participating in these behaviors. And so the transition of moving from where most of us are, and I'm not saying that to be condemning, this is the way we have been raised, okay? from the self-centeredness of judging according to the flesh and judging by the appearance of things, right? The transition from there to loving our enemies has got to begin with, because of where we are beginning, has got to begin with, look what's in it for you. I want you to hear Jesus, not in that selfish way that it still sounds self-centered, but not in that selfish way that the prosperity gospel was preached. I don't mean that. But Jesus and his apostles that are writing to us are saying to us, look what's in it for you. And that's the way they have to talk to us. The same way we have to talk to a small child. Look what's in it for you, see? But it's because there's a transition taking place. It's because there's a transition that's being introduced to us. Because the idea from Jesus, with Jesus is not that humanity is going to read the words on the page, love your enemies, and begin to love their enemies. Have you ever tried and failed? Daily. I mean, you don't even want to hear a tape of me watching a TV show where somebody's being violated by somebody else. You would think, why does he even bother to get up on Sundays and say the things he says if he actually talks like that to the television? If he actually wishes that kind of harm upon an innocent actor who's simply reading a script? If I see that guy on the street, you know what I'm saying? No, so you've tried it, I've tried it, we've all fallen flat on our face, isn't that right? All right, so now, last time we saw that our judging of others according to the flesh, according to the appearance, John 7:24, John 8:15, we saw that our judging these people, judging people in that way, is primarily a revelation of ourselves. It's primarily a revelation of what we believe about ourselves and, of course, the gospel, because those two are intertwined. Okay? In other words, our judging of one another according to the flesh, according to the appearance, is a revelation of our sense of inadequacy, unworthiness, unlovability, unacceptability, all of the things that the true gospel has resolved for all of mankind. But our judgment is a revelation of how we have adjusted to the truth of the gospel and how we have allowed it to change us, right? Okay. So, I want to say this as we go on here. In our attempt to understand what Jesus had to say about judge not, we need to first realize that it was primarily for the benefit of the one doing the judging, not the one being judged. I mean, that's what it said. Judge not, lest you be judged, right? For with the measure you meet, it shall be measured unto you, and more besides, right? And that's for the benefit. See, look what's in it for me. Remember, let's keep that in mind, right? So in other words, it's not an obedience/disobedience issue, but it's a matter of freedom/bondage for me. Okay? You know, just as in forgiveness. You know, I taught that long series on forgiveness. Just as in forgiveness, every series I've taught's long. Okay, I'll go back and cover that. Because you're saying, which long one were you referring to? But just as in forgiveness, what did we learn about forgiveness? Forgiveness is foremost beneficial to the one forgiving, isn't it? I mean, how many times have we had to go ahead and realize that, you know, first of all, the person that we're forgiving wants no part of it anyway, or that maybe they've already been deceased, or, you know what I'm saying? So just as in forgiveness, okay, the benefit really is for me. That sounds selfish, but remember, we're moving from self-centeredness into loving even our enemies. Because, and keep in mind again that all of these words really have been brought together by Jesus as a revelation of brother. Your brother is your neighbor, he's your friend. Everybody is to be understood as brother, neighbor, friend, right? Even the adversary and the enemy. My neighbor is to be understood as my brother, right? My neighbor is to be understood as my friend. My distant neighbor who lives in another part of the world under some other religious heading, in some other lifestyle, is to be understood as my friend, is to be regarded as my friend. And we see this played out in all of the works of Jesus, okay? And as he gives revelation to these things from the Old Covenant, or the Old Testament, we've talked about, when we talked about Leviticus and so on last time. But anyway, So I said previously that our judgments are rooted in our perceived need to discover a greater sinner than ourselves, someone more damaged than ourselves, in hopes that we might attain just a small measure of better than justification. Now, we don't see this anywhere else in the world, do we? Well, we do too. It starts right off with, the woman you gave me. But it was the serpent. But Dad, Caleb did this. Yeah, but Jeremy did this. None of you had that kind of thing in your family, did you? I mean, we had it with all 6 of our kids. I'm just picking on those 2. But anyway, because they were the worst at it. But anyway, we still hear it. I hear it daily with these beautiful grandchildren of mine. You know, not the youngest one yet, but you know, Dylan, Liam, right? And we don't hear this at all in politics. But Obama did this, but Bush did that. What the hell kind of justification is that? Who cares what Obama or Bush did? What's that got to do with your behavior? You see what I'm saying? We hear that. Why are we doing that? Why are we doing that? Because we are seeking some sort of self-justification boost. I'm justified because I'm better than. Right? You aren't going to paint me as less than. I'll prove to you I'm better than. Right? Okay. Now you're getting it. Listen, you don't have to turn here either, because these are the words of Paul out of 2 Corinthians 10:12 out of the RSV. When they measure themselves by one another and compare themselves with one another, they are without understanding. New American Standard says they are fools. See? I don't remember what the New King James says, but anyway. All right, go with me to Luke chapter 6 again. Well, we were there just a short time last time. Luke chapter 6, verse 27. We're just going to pick a few verses here. I'm going to cherry pick, as they say, okay? But it's a context, and you know I'm not missing anything really. I'm just going to, verse 27. But I say to you who hear. Not everybody's willing to hear, right? Hebrews says today, 4 times says today, if you will hear his voice. Okay, but he says, I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. The enemies being the ones that he was implying hate you, right? Okay, and then if we go down to read 28, bless those who curse you and pray for those who spitefully use you. All right, then down to verse 35, but love your enemies. Do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return, and your reward will be great. Your reward will be great. See, this is about what's in it for you. Get that? Your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the unthankful and the evil. Now, let me just abbreviate that. He says, love your enemies, do good to them, bless them. Pray for them, and you will be sons of the Most High. And we know this because I have hammered on this for years now. He says, you will be sons of the Most High, and we know that the creation is eagerly waiting for the revealing of the sons of the Most High, the sons of God, that the creation itself might be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God, right? And the sons of God, all right? So he says, verse 36, therefore, be merciful. See, everything before that. Love your enemies, do good, bless and pray for them, and you will be sons of the Most High. Therefore, be merciful. So in other words, the first thing we understand here is that the path to loving our enemies begins with be merciful. That's really the first thing he says. What's he talking about being merciful to? Your enemies. That's the reason I just started at 27 and then jumped down here, because he's still talking about your enemies. All right? Now, I love the fact that he doesn't say in this context, I know we know he says at other places, love your brother, love your neighbor, love your friend, or even your adversary. He goes right to the extreme. Love your enemies. Love your enemies. Right? And we saw the same thing in Matthew last week, that you may be the sons of your Father who is in heaven, he said there. But he goes directly to that extreme. And then he says in verse 36, therefore, be merciful. To whom? Your enemies. Not your brother, I mean, of course your brother, but not your neighbor, but of course your neighbor. Not your friend, but of course your friend. Not your adversary, but of course your adversary. But who's he talking about here? Therefore be merciful to your enemies. And then in verse 37, judge not, condemn not, forgive. Who's he still talking about? Your enemies. Judge not. Well, we thought we could get away with not judging the guy we go to church with for cigarette smoking or drinking too much or going to an R-rated movie. Well, okay, we won't judge him for that. But Jesus isn't talking about the guy you go to church with. Okay? Well, I guess the guy you go to church with could be your enemy, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? We've sure discovered that a lot in our 40 years in the ministry. But and again, I've been people's enemy too. Okay, so I'm never leaving myself out. But again, so he says, love your enemies, judge not your enemies, be merciful to your enemies, condemn not your enemies, forgive your enemies. And again, that you may be rewarded, that you may be rewarded. Wow, see? So again, what's the primary concern of Jesus? Our wholeness, your wholeness, my wholeness. And the enemy, in fact, in a sense, is secondary. Now listen to me. The enemy is secondary. Why? Because the enemy only benefits from our wholeness. Isn't that right? Our enemies are not benefiting from our weak and feeble attempts to do what we call love as Christians today. But remember, love can bear no adjectives. There's no lesser love or greater love. Now, I know we're going to deal with the fact that a couple of those terms occur in Scripture, but we're going to redefine them so you understand what's really being said there. It's not talking about levels of love. It's defining something different, and we'll get there in a later lesson. But so the enemy, as I said, benefits from our wholeness, as do we. Right? Let me read this verse again. Your reward will be great. This isn't a dollars and cents reward. This is not a 100-fold return. This is not a, break out your checkbook. We're going to fill your account for you. This is talking about what he says. Give, or where'd he go there? Well, I missed the verse I was looking for there. But anyway. But anyhow, so go with me over to Luke 11, verse 34. And this has been a very important passage of Scripture. I've taught several lessons kind of around this over the years. Luke 11:34, he says, the lamp of the body is the eye. Therefore, when your eye is good, your whole body also is full of light. And when your eye is bad, your body also is full of darkness. Therefore, take heed that the light which is in you is not darkness. Now, first of all, we need to understand that when he talks about the body, he's talking about the whole man. He's not just talking about your appendages and your organs, that, even though we do realize that there is connection between what's going on in the realm, of the soul and what's happening out here in the outer man. But he's talking about the body of humanity, the body of man, okay? And so what's this about? He says the lamp of the body is the eye. He's talking about how we see things, how we perceive things, or what we focus on. And he says what? If the eye, let me find the verse again. When your eye is bad, your body is also full of darkness. And putting this into the context of what we're talking about right now, he's telling me that when I'm focused on seeing things according to the flesh, according to appearance, my whole body is in effect full of darkness. Right? And he tells me, be careful that what you regard to be light is not in fact darkness. And see, we do that with all of the excuses that we make about why we cannot love a particular group of people or our enemies. We can't do that. We have justifications for why we can't love them. Now, none of this ever says love their deeds. None of this ever says embrace their deeds and approve their deeds. We're never talking about that, so don't get stupid with me. Because a lot of Christians get stupid with you right away when you talk like this, right? And that wasn't directed at you, unless you needed it. No. But anyway, no. But what he's saying is, when I focus on judging things according to the flesh, that my whole body is full of darkness. In other words, I am bound, I am imprisoned Okay? By the same judgment within myself. Okay? And I'll be unable, because my whole body, my whole sense of reasoning, and folks, we're seeing this right now, play it out in a great, great way. And again, I'm not for or against either side. But I want you to understand, we're seeing this played out in a lot of respects. And there's a way that you and I can occupy our particular, for instance, I'll use this, our particular political preferences without giving way to the darkness. We can be either or, one of the 3 or 4 different parties that are out there and available to us to participate in. You know what I'm saying? So I want you to understand this from the perspective of heart. Okay, anyway. But as I said, when I'm full of darkness, when my whole body, my whole thinking process, my whole reasoning process becomes full of darkness, then I'm unable then to judge anyone according to righteous judgment. Remember, Jesus said, my judgment is just. My judgment is righteous. And then he said in John 7:24, judge not by the appearance of things, but judge with righteous judgment. And I told you that, yes, while the word righteous and just have a very, very strong and proper Greek definition, or definition even in the English, we need to realize that when we're talking about righteous in the eyes of God, we're talking about relationship affirmation, affirming or confirming a person's relationship. But I'm not able to do that. How many of us have bought into the lie over the years, and that we couldn't love a certain group of people because they were of another religious cult, or maybe just a different, little bit persuasion, not even a cult, but or because they are of a different people group, a violent people group, a horrible people group. Well, I'm describing us right now, but anyway. But here's the thing. He's saying, I'm imprisoned by the same judgment, and therefore I'm unable to actually judge other people righteously. I'm unable to look at another man in whatever circumstance, another woman in whatever circumstance they're in, or hear about them, not even necessarily look at them, and judge them in a relationally affirming way. Children of God, my brother, my friend. These are all relationship affirmations, aren't they? That's what Jesus filled us with. Relationship affirmations. This is your brother. This is your friend. See? This is your neighbor. Yeah, sometimes he becomes adversarial with you, but he's still your brother, your neighbor, your friend. Sometimes he even becomes your enemy, but he's still your brother, your neighbor, your friend. See, these are all, and he's still a child of my Father. He is still created in the image and the likeness of my Father and I. See, that's relational, that's righteous judgment. And when it begins from there, it provides us a whole different perception of things. And remember, we're just walking around the grounds of this place called In Love right now. If you can imagine just walking through a mall. You come in out of the parking lot, and you walk into the mall, and now it's warm. Walk outside, and now it's cold. Walk inside, and now as you walk the mall, you see all kinds of stores that are very intriguing and inviting, all kinds of things that you would like to partake of. So that's what we're doing right now. We're just perusing. We're just surveying the behaviors that are available to us in this place called love. We're going to keep talking about environment until we have filled our lungs with it. Okay? So if I'm unable to judge anyone righteously, then I'm going to question my own security, my own adequacy, my own worth. Isn't that right? Because what I give out comes back on me. Right? And how many of us, sometimes we don't even realize this what's happened. But we find ourselves in a moment, and I don't mean this all happens boom, boom, right together, but we find ourselves in a moment wondering if we've displeased God. Wondering if, wondering if we're worthy of what we're asking the Lord for, of what we're petitioning God for. Am I worthy? And what we begin to do, we begin to look back, because we've been taught this by any one of a number of the multitude of do-to-be religions. So we're not picking on Catholicism. We're not picking on the evangelicals. We're not picking on the charismatics. We're not picking on the grace people. But all of them have given us opportunity to be do-to-be people, as Arthur puts it. You know? So I'll begin to question my own security, you know? And sadly, that describes the greater portion right now of the confessing church. Isn't that right? Okay. Now, you don't need to turn there because you know this one too. I want to make this a little quicker today, and it's going to be. But anyway, James 2:13, judgment is without mercy. Now listen to these words, to the one who has shown no mercy. And then, of course, that verse ends up with mercy triumphs over judgment. So again, this is about the one who has shown no mercy. So again, while this sounds negative and maybe harmful, potentially hurtful to us, well, it is, but I mean, what it's really about is, look, I'm going to show you what's in it for you. See, we're going to show you as you transition, you know, okay. So in other words, when he says judgment is without mercy to the one who has shown no mercy, this, James seems to have picked up on Paul's Romans 2:1, you know, in whatever you judge another, you condemn yourself, right? Remember that? So James could have said it this way, to whom, whenever you do not show mercy to another, you do not show mercy to yourself. See what I'm saying? You condemn yourself. But then on the other hand, he says, but mercy triumphs or lays to rest, right? The condemnation of your own heart. Always remember that it's our hearts that condemn us. We know there is therefore now no condemnation in Christ Jesus, right? We know that. There's no condemnation. I mean, all of the gospel, but the gospel is largely about, it's primarily about no more consciousness of sins. That your conscience might, having once been purified, you might have no more consciousness of sins. See, Hebrews 10:4. We need to realize that's what the gospel is about. Removing that sense of separation and alienation that was in your mind through the consideration of dead works in your life. Which is where I tend to go when things ain't going right. Where I tend to go. Surveying the dead works in my life for reasons to justify the fact that I don't hear God answering my prayer. I don't see God moving in my life. Right? Well, it's because I'm on the outside rather than on the inside. I've moved outside the mall. I'm standing out in the cold right now. Right? Okay. Now, let me give you a little perspective here that I think we need too, because of our backgrounds, which are similar, whether we've been to the same groups or not. When he says here, for judgment is without mercy to one who has shown no mercy. Now, the religious assumption is that, you know, if you haven't shown mercy to others, now this is a common one, God's not going to show mercy to you. Right? Or those to whom we've shown no mercy will show us no mercy. Well, you know, first of all, we need to realize that's never the case with the Father, because his mercy endures forever. His mercies are new every morning, right? So for us to even try to plug that into that is ridiculous, but yet we've grown up with that idea that if we don't show mercy, God's not going to be merciful to us. We've got to earn it. It is what? Quid pro quo. I'm using Latin today. I'm not Catholic. I'm just using Latin. Okay? Right? All right? But it's never the case with the Father, and it's most often not the case with others. What I'm saying is, this is not about others not showing us mercy. Again, what this is about, you know, is our own hearts condemning us along the way. Not necessarily in that moment of not showing mercy, because we feel pretty justified in that moment. But let's face this. Most of the people that we judge without showing mercy don't even know we did it. Because usually they're in another room in the house, they're in another nation, They're another group of people, right? They don't even know we did it. They could care less what you did, right? They're not going to have, very few of them are going to have any interaction with you where they're going to have the opportunity not to show you mercy. And even if they do have interaction with you, because we have been so gossipy and hidden behind doors with it and stuff like that, don't get the idea that I do this while you're upstairs, Caleb. I don't. But anyway, different rooms in the house. No, I mean, because they don't have any idea what we did, when they do come in, why would they have any motivation to not show us mercy? See what I'm saying? So we've allowed religion to speak some perceptions into our life that are way off kilter, right? Okay. Now, you don't need to turn here because I'm going to wrap up with this, but Matthew 9:13 and 12:7 both say the same thing. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, right? Now, listen, this is interesting. The word translated, well, it's rightfully translated sacrifice here is the Greek word thessia, and what the word means is victim. And think about it. You put a lamb on the altar, that's the victim, right? Burn somebody at the stake, that's your victim. But that's what the word really means, is victim. So here's what he said. I desire mercy, not victims. I desire that you give mercy and not create victims. Think about that, okay? So James could just as well have said, mercy prevents the victimization of both judge and the judged, when he said mercy triumphs over judgment. Mercy prevents the victimization. Who am I supposed to first give mercy to? My enemies. You have no effect on someone you've made a victim. And when you've made them a victim, you've made yourself a victim. So again, the foremost victimization is self-inflicted by the judge upon himself. Beatitudes, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Again, if you know other human beings, you know that's not their usual gift. Right? You just go around being merciful in life, and everybody you run into is going to show you mercy because you've been merciful. No. I have tried, and I don't mean tried in the sense of, I understand what we're talking about here, but I am fairly fluent in being merciful to all manner of people. Guess what I've received the least of in 42 years in the ministry? Mercy. I said the least of, okay. We've received a lot of love and a lot of goodness. I'm not complaining about it. I just want you to understand, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Okay, so now I'm going to say that's not the normal gift given to me by humanity, right? And if you know the Father, as I've already said, you know that there's never a quid pro quo, right? In any matter. So it's not God. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. I've got the mercy of God no matter what's going on in my life. Right? Okay. So one more time, the meaning closest to home then is from my own heart, I'll receive mercy. See, victims are the sacrifices we make and the losses we take. Victims are the sacrifices we make and the losses we take for judging according to the flesh. Think about that. See, rather than according to righteous relationship affirming judgment. We sacrifice relationship, we sacrifice peace, we sacrifice joy in every aspect of our life because we even sacrifice our confidence, our persuasion in our relationship with the Father. That was what Paul was talking about in Colossians 1:21 when he said, you are alienated and strangers, enemies in your mind. He was letting us know it's a perception thing in you as a result of, in this case, we're talking about not loving our enemies, not walking in love, right? It's in our mind. So again, as in forgiveness, I'm the greatest beneficiary of my own mercy, okay? And in righteous judgment, listen to this, in righteous judgment, I'm the first blessed by relational affirmation. Anytime I am affirming another individual's eternal relationship with the Father, I'm the first blessed by it. Isn't that right? as I am affirming your sonship, your friendship with the Father, your reconciliation with the Father, all of that friendship, as I'm affirming that, I'm building myself up. I'm the first blessed by it, isn't that right? So then, as we're wandering around in here on the grounds, as we see these things not as reproof or rebuff, which is actually what we've been taught to see them. We've been taught to see them as reproof. Judge not, lest you be judged. Right? Rebuff. Judge not, lest you be judged. Right? That's the way, but as we learn not to see them that way, but as what's in it for me, in terms of peace, joy, freedom from judgment and condemnation, then we begin to realize the first blessing rather than the requirement of walking in love. It's a blessing to walk in love, not a requirement to walk in love. You can walk where you want to be. His mercy endures forever. He's going to love you no matter where you're walking, no matter what environment you're dwelling in. He's never going to change. The environment of earth was hellfire and brimstone, so to speak, and God so loved that world that he came, right? So think about this. All right, we're going to talk more about environment next time, but so environment is the key. I want you to understand that. Understanding environment is the key. And seeing, remember the lamp of the body is the eye, okay? Seeing in this unpolluted air of love fills the whole body with light. We'll go from there next time. Did you get anything out of that? Praise God. Thank you, Lord.